All right, ladies and gentlemen, today we're going to take a look at our lesson essential question, how do we classify triangles? As you watch the video, I'm going to ask you to do two things on your Post-it note. The first is you need to write down the two ways that we can classify triangles. And the second is that I need you to list the three names we can give a triangle for each of the two ways you listed above. Remember, you can rewatch or rewind the video at any time you need assistance. A triangle is a polygon with three sides. As a refresher, a polygon must be a closed figure, have three or more straight sides, and be two-dimensional, meaning that it has to be flat. As we learn about triangles, it's important to remember your triangle notation. Remember that when you have the marks on your triangle, like this one above, the matching marks on the sides of a triangle mean that they are equal or congruent, meaning the same. On this triangle, this left side is the same as this right side because they each have one hash mark. They are different than the bottom, which has two. The small square inside of a triangle means that the two sides that meet are perpendicular, meaning that they meet at a 90-degree angle. And finally, the curved line is used to indicate an angle that is not 90 degrees. We can classify triangles in two ways. First, by their sides, and secondly, by their angles. We have three names that we can give triangles based on their side lengths. We can call them equilateral, we can call them isosceles, or we can call them scalene. In an equilateral triangle, all sides are congruent, which means all sides are exactly the same or equal. When we look at this triangle here, we have three sides that each have one mark. It's also labeled with measurements of 2 centimeters, and when all sides are exactly the same, we call that equilateral. We can also call a triangle isosceles. We classify a triangle as isosceles if it has at least two sides that are the same or congruent. Again, we look at this triangle here. This left side is exactly the same as this right side, which means that this is an isosceles triangle. Two sides are congruent. Special note we'll talk about in class later on is that an equilateral triangle can also be called an isosceles triangle because based on the definition, an equilateral triangle has at least two congruent sides. It has three. We can also classify a triangle as scalene. In a scalene triangle, all the sides will be different lengths. Again, we can see that on this triangle. 1 slash mark, 2 slash marks, 3 slash marks. All the sides are different. So we can classify triangles based on their sides. We can call them equilateral if they have all three sides the same, isosceles if they have at least two sides the same, or scalene if all the sides are different. The second way we can classify triangles is by their interior angles. We have three names that we can give triangles when we classify them by their angles. We can call them acute, we can call them right, or we can call them obtuse. In an acute triangle, all interior angles are less than 90 degrees, which means they're smaller than the corner of your Post-it note if you were to stick it in there. They're smaller than a 90-degree angle. All three must be smaller than 90 degrees. We also have the right triangle, which is when we have one angle that is exactly 90 degrees. If I were to stick my Post-it note right in the corner of this guy here, the sides would match up exactly 90 degrees. Another way that we can see this is by this notation mark here, meaning that these two sides meet at a 90-degree angle. They are perpendicular. The last way that we can classify our triangle angles is when we have one angle that is greater than 90 degrees, which means it's bigger than the corner of your Post-it note. As we can see here, this angle here is bigger than 90 degrees. It's bigger than the corner of my Post-it note. We call this an obtuse triangle. So an obtuse triangle has exactly one angle that is greater than 90 degrees. So when we classify our triangles based on their angles, we can give them three names. We can call it an acute triangle when all three angles are less than 90 degrees. We could call it a right triangle if we have one 90-degree angle. Or we can call it an obtuse triangle if we have one angle that is greater than 90 degrees. I'm going to give you an example problem here. I'd like you to pause the video and try. I'd like you to classify the triangle two ways. I'd like you to give it a name for its sides, and I'd like you to give it a name for its angles. Remember, if you need to go back through the video as a refresher or check out your post-it note, please make sure that you do. If you answered isosceles when you classified your triangle based on its sides, you are absolutely correct. This is an isosceles triangle because it has two sides that are exactly the same. I know this because I have one hash mark here and one hash mark here, which means two sides are the same. Isosceles. When I classify this triangle based on his interior angles, when I look at all three of these angles, stick my post-it note right in there or use a protractor to measure it, all three angles are less than 90 degrees. They're smaller than the corner of my post-it note. So this would be an acute triangle if I were to classify it by its angles. So this triangle right here, I would call an isosceles acute triangle. And tomorrow, we will spend some more time practicing classifying our triangles in two ways.